consensus aimed to be achieved by the global leader from G20 forum face a serious potential issue in which there is no guarantee the final consensus produced is the most objective and impartial ones. This problem arises due to the inherent nature of global leaders that is inseparable from any conflicting interests. Geopolitical tension, political pressure, and asymmetrical representative among countries group are various factors that could drive to the conversation among nations, leader into an undesirable outcome. Facing this challenge, T20 could step in to support the discussion on the G20 level towards the direction of a more desirable outcome.
Global problems from climate change to the current health and economic recovery emphasize the need for coordinated action between the G20 members. As one of the engagement group of G20, T20 Recommendation Dialogue attached for evidence-based policy that focusing on solution for global challenge.
Through its main output, the T20 communique, Indonesia's presidency pushes several recommendations to the G20 leaders to address the current turmoil. T20 Indonesia urges G20 leaders to take immediate concerted effort to achieve inclusive and stronger recovery, restructuring global health architecture, leveraging digital transformation, accelerating sustainable energy transition, and building a better and more solid cooperation.
Held on 4 to 6 September 2022 in Nusa Dua, Bali, T20 Summit 2022 brings the theme Strengthening the Role of G20 to Navigate the Current Global Dynamics. The Think 20 is the official engagement group of G20, bringing together leading think tanks and research centers worldwide. T20 was formally established in February 2012 and initiated under the Mexican G20 presidency. T20 policy briefs offer research-based policy recommendations to the G20 leaders. T20 is committed to providing innovative ideas and evidence-based policy recommendations over the last 5 years. T20 has produced 519 policy briefs supporting the inputs for the G20 process.
Hello, Mrs. Viatu. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sasa.
In supporting Indonesia's success for the G20 presidency, leaders of G20 country members need to be supported by dialogue and discussion between policy experts. So, what's the T20 contribution or relation to the G20?
The T20 Think 20 is actually one of the engagement group in G20. We are advocating policy-based and evidence-based policy on the initiative that engage and endorsed by the G20 Indonesia priorities. So we consisting of policy experts, scholars from the university and also think tanks, domestic and global. And we are inviting and currently we are compiling also input and feedbacks from policy briefs that are we are issuing also the T20 communique supporting as well the priorities of Indonesia G20 presidency on the three areas and aside of that on which priority that also should be focused on.
So would you elaborate more in a brief what's the role of T20 as an engagement group during the G20 agenda?
So the T20, when it is initiated during the Mexico presidency host, and Mexico is also a developing country, so we are engaging a more inclusive perspective in the context of the G20 process. And the T20 Indonesia, from the start, we are also we are also discussed in the context of the area of priorities. Within, we have the 9 task force in the T20, and most of our part of the task force is also aligned with the Indonesia G20 presidency, in addition of other task force that we are considered also important. For example, in the T20 Indonesia, we included, unlike we continuing previous T20 task force, but also there is additional in terms of the task force, for example, on food security. So, and in this moment, I think it is also important to address, as also mentioned in the plenary and in the opening.
The G20, as the premier global economic forum, must act together to address multi-dimensional and interlinked global challenge. The 2022 T20 is committed to maintain consistency in the agenda setting to address the most challenging international problems.
Mr. Jusman, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, Indonesia is gearing up to host the G20 summit in this year. And as we know, today's world facing multidimensional challenges. So how does the G20 take on this?
I hope that this is a momentum for us Indonesians to engage in international affairs, because I think we have done too little, not only at the level of government, but also at the level of civil societies. Some civil societies are deeply involved, but too little so far. And I think T20 Indonesia is hosting this T20 world at a very difficult time. You know them all.
Yeah.
Climate change, inequality, threatening recession in major economies, slowing growth in our part of the world, and of course, Russia-Ukraine war. That creates a very difficult circumstances for all of us, and we have to chair T20 under these circumstances. But I think at least in terms of a better understanding of the issues, we can contribute.
Okay. Well, amidst of the global challenges, as you mentioned before, such as COVID-19 pandemic, Russia-Ukraine war, climate change. So what's the T20's point of view regarding these issues?
We are going to emphasize again and again, one, cooperation. No one can solve these issues alone. Not the superpower can do that alone. Only cooperation can produce a solution to this. Number two, governance. Those problems are unlikely to be solved unless we have
Collaboration.
reform governance.
Yeah.
Reform governance. If US continue to be in rivalry with China, it will be very hard for us in the region, but also for the world economy as a whole. The same applies to Europe. If Europe is preoccupied with Ukraine war, they will have little time to address these very global issues.
So the coordination is the key and the need for action.
Yeah, I call it concerted actions. Concerted actions, because we may have to act individually, nationally, but these national positions will need to be concerted. And that's the role of an institution like G20. And mind you, of the global governance institutions that we have nowadays, G20 is the only that still works. You name it, WTO, or IMF, or etc. They are all entrenched with very difficult issues.
So G20 has a significant role to face those global
Yes.
challenges.
So however small that chance is, to come up to an agreement, to a solution, we have to do that.
Okay.
It's worthy of the effort.
The G20 summit in 2022 is planned to be held on 15 to 16 November in Bali, Indonesia, under the Indonesian presidency. The G20 stands for Group of 20 and includes, in addition to all G7 members and the European Union. The coherence between the G20 and the G7 has been long sought after. For the first time in 2021, under the Italian presidency, the G20 agreed on a joint G20 Energy Climate Ministerial Communique. The Global Solutions Summit 2022 was convened in March based on policy recommendations of the T20, one of the G20 engagement groups. As a bridge between G7 and G20, the event shared the priorities of the G7 and G20 presidencies. The T20 communique is based on the various policy briefs developed by the respective task force. The T20 communique will hopefully be reflected in the G20 leaders' communique.
Hello, Mr. Dennis. Thank you for your time. As we know that one of the global crucial issues is climate change. And you know that you ever mentioned that some of the richest countries, namely the group of 7 or G7, have the opportunity in combating climate change as well as health crises such as COVID-19 pandemic. So what the G7 can do to fight climate change?
I think there's a historic opportunity for the G7 and I believe that the G7 has a very important role to enable the developing countries to adopt the same ambitious targets as the developed countries want to, and to provide them with the assistance, technology transfer and support that will enable them to do so. And Chancellor Olaf Scholz's Climate Club is a good framework for this new type of multilateralism, because it will allow the developing countries to get the support they need to achieve the ambitious goals of the Paris Climate Accord, and at the same time be in a circle of countries that suffers no competitive disadvantage vis-a-vis others.
Mm-hmm. And then as the think tank or engagement group of G7, what's T7 recommendation highlight to T20 communique?
The T20 communique is a very important communique. And the G7 would like to highlight two things. One is that the G7 has important contributions to make to the climate action with regard to developing countries, and also a contribution to enabling a new development model to take place. And secondly, the G7 can support a new digital governance reform so as to enable developing countries to be on the same level as developed countries in terms of their voice in the digital arena.
Through collaborations with diverse institutions, including the G20 working groups, both of finance and Sherpa tracks, T20 aimed at a G20 outcome which benefits not just for the G20 member countries but also for developing countries in the wider world. The commitment, it's not just for short-term challenges, such as immediate recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic impact, but also for the longer-term challenges, including climate change, gender equality, and a return to a bio-friendly development path. Recover together, recover stronger.